My name's Shirley Francis and I'm a breast cancer survivor. I have a favourite psalm. It's Psalm 107, and during my journey I read it a lot, and one of the verses, verse 31, just speaks about giving thanks to God for His works and doing it in the assembly of people. And I'm not very good at speaking in front of people, so my son suggested that he would do a video, and that's why we're doing it this way. In 2015, I found a lump in my breast, and I went for a mammogram, and they told me it was just a cyst and it was fine, and I must just keep an eye on it. If it got bigger or started to worry me, then I must come back and they'd reassess and maybe take it out. So in 2016, it looked like it was pulling my nipple out of shape a little bit, so I thought, well, maybe it's getting bigger and I need to have it seen to. And we were going on an overseas trip in the June, so I thought, well, let me do it early, and then it's finished and done with, and we can enjoy our holiday. So I went without a worry in the world to for my mammogram, and they found 2 tumors. There was nothing wrong with the cyst, but one of the tumors was pulling my nipple out of shape. And so they did a biopsy, and it was cancer. They told me that it was lobular cancer, which is a cancer that is slow, but it causes multiple tumors, and instead of just one big one. And so that was the beginning of the journey. I think you go into shock. It's very hard to take it in. And also, I had no history of cancer in my family at all, so it came out of the blue. And I found one of the hardest things in the beginning was telling people, because you're trying to get your mind around the fact that you've got cancer, and it takes time. And when you tell people, you see the shock on their face, and you have to deal with that all over again. So that was the most difficult part in the beginning. So we had a chat with the radiologist, and he recommended a team of oncology doctors at Donald Gordon Hospital, which is a teaching hospital in Johannesburg. So we made an appointment to see the oncologist surgeon first of all, and the appointment was on the day that we were leaving for our trip overseas. So my husband Ron and I decided that if he said that I should have an operation immediately, we would just cancel the trip. But we went there thinking, I had a script in my head that it was going to be a lumpectomy, it would be a bit of radiation, but it would be fine. And he said the word mastectomy to me, and that was a shocker for me. I didn't really hear much else that he said that day, because I wasn't expecting that. He told us that we could go on our trip, that was fine, and that we would see the plastic surgeon when we got back. So my husband Ron and I, we went out to the car, we said a prayer, and we were kind of just flabbergasted. And we had to quickly rush home, pack last minute things. Our friends came and picked us up, off to the airport, book in, get on the plane, have supper. It was just all a big rush. And then on the plane, it got quiet, people were sleeping, and just these waves of panic just went over me. the idea just came to me. Let me open my Our Daily Bread app, which is a daily devotional that's you can have on your phone or on your iPad. And let me look at what God was saying to me a year ago. So I went back to May 2015 and I opened, I can't remember what day I opened. And the verse there, I know, Lord, that your ways are righteous and in faithfulness you have afflicted me. Psalm 119, verse 75. I realized there and then that God was in control of this whole situation, that He had a purpose for whatever lay ahead, and He was going to teach me through it. And I just had a great peace descend on me, and I knew I was going to be okay with God's help. So we got back from our holiday, met with a plastic surgeon. He basically gave us 3 options for the mastectomy. It was I could either go the route of a flat chest, and then I would need to have a prosthetic breast with that. The other option was to have an implant, a silicone implant, and that for me wasn't an option. I just didn't like that idea at all. And the third option that he gave us was to do a procedure called a deep flap, which is they take all the tissue out of your breast, and then they take tissue from your tummy and they put it in. And we spoke about it, we discussed, but really Ron and I, we didn't have any expertise in this field, so we felt we'll go with what he suggested, and we agreed to have that op. He told us that the op would be 8 hours, which was another sort of shock to us. I've never had an op as long as that. But the reason for the length of the op is because when they put the tissue in your breast, they have to link all the blood vessels up, and that's what takes time. So the date was set. We went in, and I was fine beforehand, but when it came to saying goodbye to Ron and actually going into theatre, I just crumbled a bit, and the porter that had come to fetch me was so kind to us. He said, look, I'm going to give you a moment. So he left us, and Dad and I, Ron and I, had a bit of a cry together, and then I was ready and off I went. Apparently the op took 11 hours. I don't know why, but it took longer than expected. When Ron was waiting outside, the anaesthetist came out and said, everything's going fine, but unfortunately the cancer has spread to her glands. Now in our ears that sounded like very bad news. For Ron it was devastating news to hear. I came out of anesthetic, and I was in ICU for a day, and then I was in high care for another 2 days. And the pain meds made me very agitated, so those 2 days were not very pleasant days. I was hooked up with drips and monitors, and I couldn't move without these things going off. They were checking on me every 5 minutes. I was just very agitated, and I had no books or phone or anything that could divert my attention. So there was a male nurse there, and I asked him, you know, would it be possible to get me earphones so I could just watch the TV and be able to listen? And he said, you know, you have to buy them, and you know, you have to get them from reception. And I think he saw my distress, and he said, look, I'll go get them for you. He was one of God's angels, because that was so helpful. And unfortunately, I didn't have any money on me, and he's a nurse on a low pay, and he was just willing to spend that money and help me out there, and that was something very special. On the 4th day I was in the general ward, and that is when the doc told me that the cancer had spread. Again, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know, does that mean that this is the end for me, or what does it mean? But these were surgeons. They couldn't give us information as to the way forward. All they could tell us was what they had found. The op went well, but we were left in a bit of a quandary. There'd been lots of disappointments along the way. The fact that I had cancer is a disappointment. The fact that I had to have a mastectomy was disappointing. The fact that the cancer had spread, the doctors had said 99% sure it won't spread, and it did spread. So we were in kind of a state of disappointment at that stage. So on the fourth day after my op, I was in the general ward. Thankfully, I was very happy to be there. And they monitored the drains in my breasts and in my tummy. And once the breast drains had stopped, they were going to discharge me. It's quite something to go home with a drain, because I'm not very good at blood and bandages and things like that. But fortunately, we found out that my medical aid would cover a nurse come in to help me, and she did the bandages and checked the drain for me, and that was very helpful. That drain, we called it Gertrude, which is a name that I don't like, and that's why I gave it to that drain, because the drain was supposed to come out in 3 weeks and it lasted 10 weeks, and it just wouldn't stop. They did another op, and then they had to put it back in again, and yeah, that dratted drain. We prayed for that drain so much, and it just wouldn't stop. Those 2 months of waiting after the op and before we saw the oncologist were very difficult months. I learned a lot about who God is. When you face your own mortality, you realize that this earth has got quite a strong hold on you. You face the prospect of leaving your family, leaving everything that you know, and we went through some quite difficult and scary times. Friends of mine had been telling me to read a book by Laura Story. It's called When God Doesn't Fix Things. And I resisted for quite a while, because I wanted God to fix my cancer. And the title just wasn't doing it for me. So eventually, though, I realized this is the book that God wants me to read. And when I read it, I realized that when things go wrong, all the disappointments that we faced, the fact that I had cancer, the fact that I had to have a mastectomy and not a lumpectomy, the fact that the cancer had spread, and that drain that just wouldn't stop, all those disappointments, those can be blessings in God's hands. And that changed my way of thinking, and it helped me very much in those months. Laura Story wrote a song that sums up her book, and I'd like to read to you the chorus of that song. What if your blessings come through raindrops? What if your healing comes through tears? What if 1,000 sleepless nights are what it takes to know you are near? What if trials of this life are your mercies in disguise? God sent us special angels to help us at that time. My friend Mary Coppin and her husband Garth, they just seemed to know when to phone us, when to bring a meal, when to encourage us. They were a huge help to us at that time. I have a friend, Bev, who sent me an SMS every night to tell me that she loved me and she was praying for me. I have another friend, Cynthia, who just when I needed it, she would phone me and encourage me and allow me to talk and chat through things with her. And all three of these ladies, and Garth as well, they have experienced cancer in one form or another, whether it's themselves or their family. And talking to another cancer survivor or sufferer, you can't beat that. They have an empathy with you that no one else can have, and it really highlights that verse in Corinthians where it says, God, you can comfort others with the comfort that God gives you. And that's what these ladies brought for me. There was other folks. My daughter-in-law's mom sent me a passage of scripture every morning. There was Vanessa, who's the intercessor at our church, and she kept everyone at the church up to date with what was happening, and so that they could pray for me. People sent countless SMSs and little messages, and they all meant so much. You know, sometimes people get irritated when they get messages on their phone, but at that time, every message meant so much to me. We met up with a friend called Carol Garner, who we hadn't seen for a long time, just when I was about to have my op, and she was able to help us with medical aid issues. She told me that I needed to apply to be on the oncology program, which I didn't know anything about. But if you're on the oncology program, they pay everything out. If you're not, then they don't. So that was a huge help. Getting the admission sorted, all those kind of things. You know, when you're not an expert on medical aids, you don't know what you're doing, but she was a huge help to us. And then people were praying for us from different churches, just our clients from work, just people all over the place, all over the world. My mother's church was praying for us. It was just a very humbling experience to have so many people praying for you. And my daughter Katie was another huge angel for us, because she started a broadcast messaging system for us, and just let everyone know what was happening, and so that they could pray for us. And that was a huge help, because I wouldn't have been able to cope with letting people know and answering messages and things like that. So she did all of that for us, and that was great. Two months later, in the September, we met with our oncologist, Dr. Adam Nosworthy, and it was such a relief to meet with him, because at last we were able to talk through what was happening, what did it mean that the cancer had spread, what was going to happen to me, what sort of treatment he was going to do. And basically he just said to us, look, it doesn't matter where the cancer is, we're going to treat it, so don't worry about that. The treatment was 2 lots of chemo. The first one they call the Red Devil, and very aptly so. It's not a very pleasant treatment to go through. I had 4 treatments with 3 weeks in between. After each treatment for 10 days, I was basically man down with nausea and just very tired. I started with mouth sores, and it was just a very miserable time. And then after the 10 days, I would pick up again, and then you'd go in for your next one. Yeah, those were tough days, knowing what lay ahead, but we got through it. The second was much easier, but it did have its side effects as well. There was tiredness, and there was also nerve damage, which caused tingling in the hands and feet, and sometimes in my back as well. And that could drive you nuts. That feeling of those tingles were just horrible. Then after the chemo, they gave me 3 weeks break, and then I started on my radiation, and that started on in April of 2017. and that was for a month. And the radiation for me was an easy ride, but it's just time consuming because you have to go in every day. And we fortunately had an early appointment, so we were in and out early in the morning without the traffic, and home again. And those folk at the radiation department were just fantastic. Unfortunately, radiation does do damage. I didn't have any burns on my chest, and I didn't have any bad side effects. It does do damage, and so now I need to do exercises to keep my shoulder from stiffening up, and I have to do manual drainage of my glands because they've been damaged as well. So those are the things that you live with afterwards. One of the things that is a certainty with the first chemo is that you will lose your hair. That's quite something you don't realize, but losing your hair, you lose a bit of your identity. And I must say that was quite an experience. And the funny thing is, I mean, you lose your eyebrows, you lose your eyelashes, even the nose, your nose hairs, you lose that, and you realize how important your hair is. I started wearing a wig, but it just felt fake. It didn't feel right for me. I stopped wearing the wigs because it just felt fake for me, and it wasn't who I was at that stage. So I just found some scarves in my cupboard and wrapped them around my head. And what was wonderful is that people stand with you. I know before I started my chemo, my two sons shaved their heads, and that was very special. That was so good of them. Also, my family took me to a shave-a-thon as a surprise, and they all had their hair sprayed in support of me. The women in my church started wearing scarves on their heads for me. All those things made it so much easier and to deal with the trauma of losing your hair. The support of my family made the chemo easier. The fact that my daughter and my husband made sure that they were with me every time I went. In spite of their work commitments, they were always there to give me a lift there and back. And that's important because especially after the chemo, you don't feel well, and I couldn't have done it myself. Also meeting people at the oncology ward. You see people far worse off than you are, and you just encourage one another, and you speak a special language, you know, oncology terms, and you know exactly what the other one's feeling without the hair, or giving tips on how to do things. That was very special. The nursing staff, the doctors, were all very supportive of us. During the chemo treatment especially, we had very little social life. We couldn't make dates with people because we didn't know how I would be feeling that day. It could be a bad day, it could be a good day. Very often I wouldn't be able to go to church, and I missed the fellowship. I missed being part of the church family. But people kept in touch with me through SMSs and through their prayers, and when I did get to church, they would just surround me with their love and kindness, and so that made it easier for me. I did continue working through that time. We work from home, so that was pretty easy to get to work. I just had to walk down the stairs and into my office. I found that the chemo made me feel like I was disabled in some way, and I needed that sense of accomplishing something during the day. And so I tried to keep my life as normal as possible. I did go to work, I did make supper, I did the washing, just so that I could say I had done something, I had accomplished something at the end of the day. the miracle of that time when Ron and I look back, because Ron and I worked together, and the miracle is that we never missed a deadline. None of our clients were compromised in any way during that time, and we're very grateful to God for that. Was that when He allows affliction in your life, as a loving Father, He showers you with love at the same time. There is a wonderful passage, Psalm 146. Do not put your trust in princes, in human beings who cannot save. When their spirit departs, they return to the ground, and on that very day their plans come to nothing. Blessed are those whose help is the God of Jacob, whose hope is in the Lord their God. My grandson John T was due to be born, and in fact he was born a little bit early, and it just so happened that he was born on the day before I started my first chemo treatment. And so I was able to go to the hospital to meet him for the first time, to enjoy that very special moment as a family, and then the next day go to my chemo with that joy still in my heart that he had been born. That was very special. Another example was my chemo treatment had to be changed to the 15th of December instead of the 16th of December. That meant that my 10 days of misery stopped on the 24th of December, and I was able to celebrate Christmas with my family, eat the Christmas meal, have a great time. So that was, the timing of that was amazing. My mom came out in the March and for a visit. My mother lives in Scotland. Just so happened that our little granddaughter Alexia was born while she was here, and I was between chemo and radiation, so I was able to enjoy that. And my granddaughter was born on my mother's birthday, and her second name is Iris, which is my mom's name, so you really can't beat that for timing. And we were able to have a little holiday with my mom in Cape Town then as well, because I was on a break. Just on that tummy drain, you might be tired of me speaking about that drain. We really did battle with it, and as I said to you before, I had an op to try and sort it out. They took it out and then they put it back in again. And then a couple of days before the chemo, there was the big questions, what's going to happen to the drain, because when you're on chemo, then things don't heal because of the effects of chemo. So we decided to take it out, and miracle of all miracles, my wound healed, and that was the end of the drain. So the timing just before my chemo was perfect. Last but not least, my daughter and her boyfriend Jared got engaged in November of 2016. There was a lot of discussion about the date for the wedding, and Jared had a lease at his place in Jackal Creek that ended at the end of July. So in the discussions we decided that if we set the date for the middle of July, the 15th of July to be exact, then they would be able to get ready for the wedding and not worry about moving, and then move into their new place at the end of July when they came back from their honeymoon. So that sounded all very logical and right. What actually happened is that my PET scan, which is a big moment for any cancer sufferer, it was booked for the 10th of July. And my result date, the day that I went to my doctor to hear the results from the PET scan, was booked for the 12th of July. So that's 3 days before the wedding. People were thinking we're crazy because, and we were also worried, what if the results are not good? So we made a decision that we weren't going to tell anyone the results until after the wedding, come what may. The morning of the day that we went for the results, I had a little tin that a friend had given me. Her son has leukemia and is still under treatment, and in this tin was Bible verses. So that morning I took a verse out of that tin because we were very nervous about what lay ahead. And lo and behold, it's my favorite psalm, Psalm 107. And the verse said, "By my word I have healed you." And I knew that to be true. And so I went with a light heart to the doctor's surgery. We were all there. My brother had surprised us with a visit from Australia. He had come over for the wedding, so he was there. My son Bradley was there. Katie was there. My daughter, my husband Ron. And we got the good news that I had the all clear, that there was no trace of the cancer. To have that 3 days before the wedding was such a gift to my daughter, because she could get married without worrying about her mother and her cancer, and we were just able to use that event to celebrate the good news. Another great timing from a woman's perspective was that my hair had grown back enough to give me a decent hairstyle for the photos, so that was great. There was the announcement of my daughter-in-law's pregnancy. There was the birth of both my grandchildren. There was the announcement of the engagement. There was a wedding. There was a visit from my mom from Scotland. There was a visit from my brother from Australia. And I just think if I had to time having cancer at any time, with all these wonderful events just helping us through, taking away the sadness and the stress of the treatment, I couldn't have timed it better myself. I always say that cancer is a journey, it's not an event, it's not something that just happens and then that's the end of it. When you're in remission, you are still dealing with a lot of the side effects that the chemo and the radiation bring, and it takes time for your body to heal. So you're dealing with that, and also just as much as cancer was a big word for us to take in and for our minds to get around, so was surprisingly remission. It takes a while to get out of that mode where you're surviving, you're on the medical merry-go-round, you're seeing this doctor, you're having that treatment. It takes a while for your mind actually to relax and be able to take in the fact that you are now in remission. I am still on treatment. I'm taking tamoxifen. That was a decision that I made, and I'm doing very well on it. So that will continue for at least another 5 years, all going well. Also with remission, I've been in enough oncology waiting rooms and spoken to enough cancer survivors and sufferers to know that cancer can come back. It's something that you have to face, and you usually face it when you go for your checkups. It's always an anxious time, but I keep going back to that verse that the Lord gave me, "By my word I have healed you," and so I just revisit it at those times. People said to me that I was brave, but I know that I wasn't. There was times that I was terrified on this journey. But the one thing that gave me strength was God's word. When God highlights a passage for you and you know it comes from Him, you know it's true. And it gives you an inner peace that nothing else can. So from the time that He gave me that verse on the plane, He gave me many other verses that gave me peace and the inner strength along the journey. Let me end with my favorite psalm again, Psalm 107, verses 21 and 22. Let them give thanks to the Lord for His unfailing love and His wonderful deeds for mankind. Let them sacrifice thanks offerings and tell of His works with songs of joy.
You go through a lot of ups and downs, but it's a very big privilege and a very big honor to be able to take care of one of your parents. They take care of you your whole life, and even though it's very difficult to see them that way, I definitely saw it as God blessing me with an opportunity to look after my mum. To start a broadcast list on WhatsApp, a lot of people wanted to know what was happening, and it can be quite draining on my mom going through cancer, or my dad, to be able to update everyone on the things that were happening. So it was nice to be able to send one message to a whole bunch of people, and then everyone was able to interact with me, and I could pass on anything I needed to my mom and dad. So that was a very nice practical thing and a nice way to use. Another thing was to be able to take my mom to chemo. It was a very busy time at work for my father at times, so to be able to go with my mom was great sometimes, because we would play some nice music or have a good cry or have a good laugh. Firstly, to take it as a blessing. Like I said before, it is such an honor to be able to help your parents. Talk about it. There are days that it's very difficult to watch. I have many memories in my head of very difficult times. Watching someone suffer is not easy. If you have a friend that has been through it, definitely confide in them. It's very difficult to speak about it when people don't quite know, but make sure you have people you can speak to and a support system. To do something that you can enjoy on your own, and also have exciting things to look forward to. Sometimes you find you're just going from day to day, and to have little pockets of hope and joy, hold on to those. Something like a birthday, really enjoy it, really celebrate it, because you start to learn how to cherish life a lot more. And having my wedding was really lovely to look forward to. And to have my mom on those special occasions, I think I cherished them a lot more because of what we're going through. I think some people don't always really want to know, and not in a bad way. They're just showing their care and their love and their support. But some days you do just need to speak about it, and people don't know that, so they're constant asking. Sometimes it was frustrating, but most of the time I really appreciate it, just because I know that they're just trying to care and love, and some people don't know what to say to you. I think my advice would be to treat those people as you normally would. Sometimes they need to just laugh, sometimes they need to cry, and sometimes that will come from the laughing. You need to allow them the space to talk and just listen.
So it was May the 17th, 2016. This happened to be my birthday. And Shirley had gone in for her mammogram, and it was supposed to be just a normal checkup as it used to be. And I remember the day very clearly. I was sitting at my desk, car pulled into the garage. Just something slightly different happened, in that I could hear Shirley was being anxious. She walked in without knocking on the door, and she was crying. And I thought, now what happened now? Is it an accident? And she said, "Ron, I've got cancer." And in just that microsecond, our life changed immensely. And I sat her down and I said, what do you mean? What do you mean you got cancer? What are you talking about? You went for a mammogram. She said, "No, the doctor says I've got cancer." And I said, "Well, let's just sit down, let's process this. Well, you got cancer." And that changed our life completely. And took us quite a while to digest that. I said to her quite clearly, let's not tell anyone. Let's try and discuss this between the two of us. Let's try and fathom out what you're talking about here. You've got cancer. And the way to do that is we spoke to a few doctors, and then the one Sunday she said, "Look, we've got to tell the children." So the one Sunday afternoon we called the family together, and they kind of sensed that there was something just not right. And when we mentioned that Mom's got cancer, there was startlement, and the shock hit their faces. And then there was that drawing the whole family together where they said, right, we are in this together. The day arrived for the operation, and I remember it quite clearly in that we were told that it would be an 8-hour journey. We went to a part of Johannesburg that I've never ever frequented, namely Donald Gordon Hospital. And we arrived nice and early. We were shown up to the room. The doctors visited us and prepared us for the way ahead. And then we realized this is the start of an 8-hour day. I was in communication with the doctors all the time. And at lunchtime, there was the first of the many communications that I received that the operation was going well, but the bad news was that cancer had spread. That's all I was told. And with that, my mind just played all kinds of tricks. So I left home and I went straight back to the hospital to try and work out what they were saying, because I was hoping that I'd see one of the doctors. But that never took place until the 11th hour. 11 hours. The one doctor walked out and said, sorry. He said, sorry that the cancer had spread. And I realized that the language that the doctors used and the language that I, as a man in the street, hear, two different things. We saw Shirley wheeled into high care, and so we came home. And arrived home at about 1 o'clock in the morning, devastated with the news that the cancer had spread. We didn't know what that meant. Went to sleep that night at about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, or tried to sleep that night. A lot of crying and a lot of praying, a lot of time on my knees. As soon as the sun broke through the clouds, we went back to hospital, not knowing what we would see. And Shirley was absolutely brilliant that morning. As we saw each other, we both cried. No words were expressed, just crying. And then the one doctor came through and said the operation was a success. And again, what does that mean, a success? And we were to find out many months later what actually success meant. It meant through Dr. Adam Noseworthy that cancer can be treated. Again, how difficult it was to be alone for those weeks while Shirley was in hospital is traumatic. I just couldn't handle all the communications that was expected of me, and fortunately Kathleen was able to set up a broadcast list that spoke to the many people that really were concerned. And did we appreciate it? Unbelievably so. The prayers, the wishes, the friends that were coming out of the woodwork that we thought we had lost, and they were coming into the very forefront of our lives again, praying for us, was just amazing. So I broke the year ahead of us into 4 sections of 3 months. The first 3 months was all about the operation and trying to overcome the operation. The second 3 months was this chemo with Shirley losing all her hair with the Red Devil, where she would go in for treatment on a Friday and for the next few weeks would be out of it. Then we had a break during the Christmas season. Then we had the third set of 3 months where she'd have the second treatment every week, and then finally we came to the last 3 months of radiation. And yet in all of this, the timing of God was unbelievable. The support of the family was superb. I got so close to the Lord. I could hear his heart beating. It was just absolutely amazing. The PET scan journey was amazing in that we now came to the part where they would take the final result of this year-long treatment. We went into a hospital on the northern sides of Johannesburg. Sat there for the morning. We're told that we would get the results in 2 weeks' time, which was 3 days before Kathleen's wedding. And I was adamant that regardless of the result, we would not tell anyone the result that we would have until after the wedding. I was just probably hedging my bets. We sat in the hospitals. It was the results meeting was supposed to be scheduled at 8 o'clock that morning. An hour later, we were called into the rooms of Dr. Adam Northworthy. The first words that came out of his mouth were the following: "Surely you are free." And the relief was profound that she had beaten this thing called cancer. God had answered our prayers. The prayers of many were answered that day. It was so exciting, and out went the note that I had made adamantly that we would tell no one. Within seconds, the broadcast list had told everybody, "Surely he's free of cancer." Thank you, Lord, for what you did. Thank you for the persistence and the faithfulness and the comfort and the walking with us. You were so faithful, still so faithful. We face a new battle called remission, but that is so much different to this past year. A year where you were so close to us, and we thank you for that. Thank you to all our friends, our family that stayed with us so closely. Appreciate it so much. In the words of that one hymn, "To God be the glory." Great things he has done.
We pray for blessings, we pray for peace, comfort for family, protection while we sleep. We pray for healing, for prosperity.